Hi, everybody. I'm Tony Pujols, and I work for AWS. I'm on the containers team, and today I am going to talk to you about various deployment strategies that you can use where AWS App Mesh is going to simplify your job immensely. We'll discuss a number of deployment patterns, and then I'll give you an App Mesh walkthrough, and finally a demo. And as I go through these patterns, we're going to talk about three very common deployment strategies. And then I'll show you how App Mesh is going to provide you with this application level networking that's going to simplify the job. And then again, finally, the demo. So here are three fairly common deployment strategies that are typically used in a production environment. And in reality, these are all variations of each other, but there's a little bit of a difference in how you look at it, so let's cover it. The Bluegreen Deployment, the goal is to be able to switch over in your production environment from one version of your application to another version of your application with minimum downtime. When we talk about a Canary release, we're also shifting traffic, but in this case, what we're doing is we want a small amount of traffic to go to one version of our application so we can kind of test the waters with it. It uses this example of a canary in the coal mine, which is to let you know if there are any problems. Then finally, we've got this notion of A/B testing, which is where we are splitting traffic between two versions of the application, normally to measure some kind of performance metric. Typically, it's for marketing purposes to see which segment of the application or which version of the application tends to drive more traffic and lead to more successful outcomes. So first I'll cover Bluegreen Deployment. And in this model, I've got two services, A and B. And what I want to do is roll out a new version of B. And I want to be able to switch traffic over from, in this case, B1 over to B2. And this is 100% switch over. And when I switch over to B2, there's no more traffic going to B1. If I roll out another upgrade to B3, again, I'm going to shift traffic over 100% to that new version. So although we call it blue-green, it really just means that I'm going to go from my blue environment to my green environment, and the next update, I'll switch over to the blue environment. Next update, back to the green environment. And let's contrast that with Canary Deployment. In the Canary Deployment, again, I've got A and B here, and what I'm going to do is roll out this new version, but I'm only going to send a small amount of traffic to it. So B1 is still live, it's still receiving traffic, and in this example, it's 95% of the traffic, and B2 is getting 5% of the traffic. At some point when I'm satisfied, I'll turn the knobs and switch that over to 100% of the traffic going to B2. And again, if we roll out another update, in this case B3, I'll do my Canary. I'll send a little bit of traffic to B3, and if all goes well, then 100% of my traffic. Let's take a look at the A/B testing model. In A/B testing, in this example, the /color route is going to send traffic to B, but what I want to do is have two different versions of B, and so I want my 50% of traffic going to BA and 50% of traffic going to BB here. And at some point, I decided I like BA better than BB, and I'll resume sending 100% traffic to that version. So let's talk about App Mesh and how we can handle these different kinds of scenarios. How App Mesh provides you with application level networking that's going to make this process of splitting traffic, shifting traffic over from one to the other, fairly straightforward, fairly easy to reason about. So here what we see is the programming model for the application. We've got two services. What I showed before when I talked about A and B, in this case, A is gateway, B is color teller. So we've got this gateway service, and it's going to go ahead and fetch a color from our color teller service. Color teller could be returning any kind of content. In this case, it just happens to return a string, but it could have been HTML, it could be JSON, it could be YAML. It returns a string, And V1 of our color teller service returns blue. And then our gateway service is going to go ahead and return a structured document back to the caller. It's going to return JSON. It'll say what color was fetched. And as you'll see actually later on when I do a demo, it'll also return a histogram of all the colors that have been fetched to this point. But this reflects our programming model. And what this means is that as the programmer, when I implemented my gateway service, I made a fetch over to a color teller service. I don't care what version of a color teller is running on the back end in this example. I don't care if it returns different content because it's a different version. I don't have to know where the compute resource is actually located. I just make a request to color teller. And we're going to go into this in a little more detail as we go through the remaining slides. Now, that was the programming model. In terms of our compute model, which is the work that gets done physically, we've defined a number of services. There's this gateway service, there's a color teller blue service, there's a color teller green service. Now, the color teller services, we're using colors just to make things nice and neat for this example about Bluegreen Deployment. But this could have just as easily been color teller V1 and color teller V2 code. Okay, so under the, behind the scenes, we've got the gateway service and the color teller blue service in this specific example are running on ECS. So there were container images for these tasks that we deployed, the gateway container and the color teller container. They've been deployed with sidecars, Envoy proxy running as a sidecar, which is what allows the magic of App Mesh to work. And these have been deployed to EC2 instances as part of this ECS compute model. Now on the right, we can see our new version, which is color teller green. And this could have been color teller V2, whatever you wanted to call it. And in this example, we're actually going to take advantage of the Fargate launch type. Maybe we're shifting our entire application over to Fargate. We don't want to have to manage infrastructure anymore. We're still running containerized tasks. So we use the Fargate model. And that's what this is demonstrating here. Color teller green is going to run as a Fargate launch type, which means it's going to run in a Fargate cluster on top of ECS. But you're not managing EC2 instances. And then finally, we have this abstract model around the color app, this abstract model for App Mesh. This is where we are going to provide that mapping between what we wanted as the programmer, what actually exists in terms of our compute, and how do we make that happen? How can we provide some policies and controls over traffic? And in this model for App Mesh, we're going to define some of these constructs. We're going to define virtual nodes, which is where there is a mapping between our abstract model in App Mesh to physical compute resources. So for every version of every software that's running, there's going to be a virtual node, which you can see with these green nodes in this diagram. Because we want to shift traffic over from color teller blue to color teller green, we don't have our gateway node talking directly to color teller blue. What we have it doing is it talks to a virtual service. By being a virtual service, this allows, this acts as a back end for gateway that abstracts it again from how we're going to shift traffic over physically behind the scenes. This virtual service is associated with a provider, and the provider is this color teller virtual router, which is going to have some route rules. The route rule is what we're going to use to shift traffic over between blue and green. So let's take a look at this again. We've got this model here. We're going to shift traffic over between two different versions of a service. We might do it all at once. We might do it gradually. But how we do it behind the scenes, there is this physical aspect. We've got our tasks that we deployed. There's a number, if we're running with high availability, we've got a replica of each task running in different availability zones. And that's what we see here. We've got two replicas of A talking to two replicas of B, and we want to move that traffic over to two new replicas of B. And so what we really want is this kind of mapping here. We want something that's going to wrap A and B and allow us a provide these rules that shifts traffic over based on our model, that abstract model. And that's what we're going to do here. So in this picture here, what I'm showing is that we've deployed our application. There's a number of CloudFormation stacks that we're associated with it. It's broken down into a couple different layers. We've got our VPC, and then we have our physical cluster here and demo ECS cluster, and then more our latest task, the green version, is in demo Fargate color teller. Now, on top of that, we also have our demo App Mesh and demo App Mesh color app stacks as well. The App Mesh was just the stack to create the basic mesh, and then App Mesh color app is where we provided our rules. We're going to take a look at this. First, we can see here that our tasks are running. These are the only ones we're concerned about right now. I've deployed this example that's we've got as part of our public examples repo, and there's a few extra tasks in here. But the ones we're going to focus on are this color gateway service, color teller blue, and color teller green service. We can see that our new color teller green service is running with the Fargate launch type. I can take a look in the App Mesh console, and I can see that we've got these virtual nodes. This is where we have that mapping between this abstract concept inside of that App Mesh to the physical compute that's happening somewhere. So these virtual nodes have been defined. There's color gateway VN, color teller blue VN, and color teller green VN. We have that virtual service that I mentioned a moment ago, and that is for our backend. Gateway communicates with its backend using this virtual service. And in this case, it's called color teller. The namespace for our service is demo.local, so we've got colorteller.demo.local. Now, our service, again, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm showing you here, we've got this provider, and this provider is our color teller VR. It's the virtual router that we're going to use. So let's take a look at that. Under virtual routers, here's my color teller VR, and it's got one route associated with it, color teller route. And when I click into that, I can see that right now, 100% of my traffic is supposed to go to color teller blue. If you go take a look at AWS Cloud Map, you can also see that namespaces here have been defined as part of our deployment. I can see that I've got color teller, and that this is what Gateway is using. Color teller is associated with that virtual service. Now, behind the scenes, that we know that our virtual router is going to apply rules. Ultimately, it's going to shift traffic based on some proportion between color teller green and color teller blue. So let's look at this picture again. This was our App Mesh abstract model. This was our programming model. And so what we have here is the configuration for App Mesh itself, for the resources. I showed you those resources in the console. This is what it looked like inside of our CloudFormation. If you take a look, you can see I've defined our color teller blue virtual node. And this is where we see this mapping, where color teller blue is going to be mapped to color teller blue, the service name, which is registered in DNS. And that registration is going to happen when we actually deployed our color teller blue task, our services and tasks associated with it. So if I come back here, this is our App Mesh configuration. And this is your typical, this is a typical CloudFormation stack where you would have defined your service and your task definition and everything else you needed for this to actually run. Same thing, color teller green virtual node, color teller green service discovery record, and the service defined inside of our stack. And then our color gateway virtual node. And the difference between the previous two and this one is that here we've defined a backend, and that backend is our virtual service. And this is going to be color teller dot demo.local. The color teller virtual service has been defined here in YAML, and we can take a look at this. It's associated again with that virtual service name. It'll be colorteller.demo.local. And its provider is this virtual router, colorteller VR. Colorteller VR was defined up here, and it's going to map. It has an association with a specific route, and we've defined this route here. This colorteller route is associated with colorteller VR. So this is the mapping from this route to the router that in which for the scope that it's in. And here's where we define the actual route itself. So in this particular example, I am using a weighted target of 2 to 1. We're going to change that in a moment, but what this is showing you is that where in the console I showed 100% of our traffic was going to colorteller blue. Actually, in this version of our App Mesh configuration, it shows that we've got a 2 to 1 ratio of traffic that's going to go to colorteller blue versus colorteller green. This is taking advantage of what we call a weighted target as part of our route specification. So let's go ahead and demo. As part of this demo, let me go back and switch over to my console. Let's clear this right here. And let me actually, let's start fresh in this case. Let me get rid of this. And let me deploy it. So I'm using the AWS App Mesh update route CLI command to deploy this updated route, and that's going to ensure that I'm back in the state where 100% of my traffic is going to colorteller blue. I also could have done this from the App Mesh console. I could have gone into routers, colorteller VR, and I could have edited the route here. But what we can see is that right now 100% of our traffic is going to go to colorteller blue. So if I fetch a color, so let's curl that. Now I've already saved the public IP address in this environment variable color app. So I'm just going to go ahead and curl on color. And I can see that I got my result, and it says blue. There's a histogram there that shows the percentage of responses over time between blue and green. I was actually testing this before demoing, but let's go ahead and let's clear that just to start it fresh. And let's curl this again. So here's my updated histogram that shows that 100% of my requests have observed the blue color getting returned. We can think of blue in this case as being version 1. If I go to my X-ray console, I have this really neat view here in the X-ray that's going to show us traffic that's coming in. And by default, I can take a look at the entire service map, and what you'll see is you'll see some extra clients in here, and that's because we've got health checks. So there's health checks on the different versions that are running. To filter it on just what we want to take a look, I've created this color route group, and that is going to provide this filter on just what's coming in through the Color Gateway virtual node. And let me go ahead and apply it. And here we can see that requests have come in. They've hit the Color Gateway Envoy proxy that sits in front of our gateway service. And then our gateway service has sent a request to the color teller that is configured to respond, which is colorteller blue. And so that request has gone through its proxy and ultimately to color blue. Now, if I come over here and I update this, let's take a look at this route configuration again. In this case, let's go ahead and shift some traffic. We'll use, if this were a blue-green test, a blue-green deployment, I'd actually just want to shift everything over, 100% of traffic to green. And that's easy enough to do, but let's make this interesting. Let's just do our Canary deployment first, since this is really just a special case. I'll leave this at 95. Oops. I went 95, and I'll change this to 5. What this means is if I run this 100 times, I should only see 5 requests, roughly speaking, to my green. Now that's going to take us a little bit of time for a demo, and I don't want to take that long. So what I'll do is I'll use the same number as if we were going to use A/B testing, because what I want to show is that these weighted targets allow us to handle all of our scenarios. I can't type. With weighted targets, I can shift 100% traffic over to green. I can shift a percentage of it over. I can do 50-50 of it. So I'll do 50-50. And we'll update. And that's then our update. And let's go ahead and run a test. Now, a reasonable test would actually keep looking for a while. So I'll pick a number. Let's just use 100 for right now. What I should see is that over this amount of testing, I'll see traffic go towards 50-50 in my histogram. I should see a roughly 50-50 distribution. And after 100 of these, I see almost 50-50. And if I kept doing this, it would continue to approach 50-50 more exactly. And I'll go to my X-ray console and update it. Let's give it a second here. Yeah, there we go. We can see that it's updated. We can see that we can see that traffic is going both to green and to blue. And what I can see and what I'm looking for, and whether I had shifted 5% over or 50-50 over or 100% over, but in any case, I'm looking to see that I've got 0 errors. If I have some errors, of course, I'm going to want to start investigating. I'll want to take a look at what's going on, maybe in terms of routes, try to identify where I had my failure or my breakdown in a larger application with more services. You can imagine you'll digging through here and taking a look at the life cycle of the entire request and resolving the problem from that perspective. But going back here, I'm happy. I can see that after running 100 tests, I had no errors. I also could go ahead and take a look at my CloudWatch logs. Oops. And the nice thing about this is that you've got CloudWatch logs that are going to show you how you're, if you have any kinds of problems or anything else that's happening, whatever it is that you're looking for, that gives you insight into any problems that you need to identify with your application. You're going to come into the logs. You're going to take a look and go from there. So I might take a look at color teller, green, oops, how was it? And I'm happy. I'm seeing what I expect to see. I'm not seeing any problems. So I'm looking at my logs. I am able to look inside of X-Ray to take a look at my requests in my service map and feeling confident about this. So at this point, I might want to shift 100% of my traffic over to green. If this were a Bluegreen deployment, I would have started there. I would have just done it right away, but that implies you add some other confidence in your system that there was going to be no problems when you shift it over. Canary Test makes it nice where you can test the waters with a small percentage, make sure things are looking good, and then increase that load. But at this point, I'm at 100%. So if I do that, I've updated App Mesh, I've updated the configuration, and again, just to repeat, I could have come in here and I could have done this in the console. I can see 100% in the console is going to go to green now. Let's test that. If I ran enough tests, I would see ultimately that histogram showing me approaching 100%. Of course. And let's take a look. Update X-Ray. And really what I'm looking for at this point is to see that I don't have any errors. If I now go ahead and just remove, if I actually stop my blue task and remove it, all my traffic is going to green. At this point, I'm happy. Green is working. Green is fine. So let's recap a little bit here. I'm taking advantage of App Mesh, which provides us with application level networking. It's available worldwide, and it gives us both the ability to control traffic as well as to observe that traffic. It's got these integrations that we were looking at from App Mesh that allow us to plug in monitoring in terms of logs, metrics, and distributed tracing. App Mesh is instrumented because it's based on instrumentation around that service proxy, that Envoy proxy, which is intercepting all traffic to every different service inside of my mesh. So I've got logging, I've got metrics, I've got tracing, and I've got client-side traffic management. And if you saw the previous version, previous tech talk in this series, you saw that introduction to App Mesh. You can also take a look at the docs I'll provide here towards the end that kind of talk about what's really happening behind the scenes. But what I showed you today is that this client-side traffic management means that every node, every service knows how to talk to its backend into all those replicas that are actually running point to point directly. All data is traveling through the data plane. Nothing is going outside of it. Nothing's going through the control plane. There's actually no physical router, by the way. All traffic ends up going from each service that makes a call to a backend goes directly to that backend. So what we saw here were weighted targets, and we saw how we applied routing control based on a path. In the future, and coming up very soon actually, you'll see that you've got other things you can discriminate on. So it's not just based on your HTTP route. You can also base it on HTTP headers or cookies or hostname, that kind of thing. Those will be available for making decisions about how you want to shift traffic over and split it between two different versions of a service or distribute or completely shift it over. Here are a few links that will provide you with some background information on what I just showed you. Specifically, what will help you with this color app is the examples repo, and everything is explained inside of here. And they go hand in hand with these two blog posts. So you can take a look at these blog posts that give you the basic color app walkthrough for App Mesh, and then talk about distributing traffic over to a new task running in Fargate. Thank you very much for joining this session. I hope this helped you to understand that in terms of shifting your traffic via App Mesh, you have this extremely powerful tool that it simplifies what otherwise has always been challenging for doing this kind of work inside of a production environment. With a few simple commands, or in the console, a few simple interactions in the console, I was able to take compute tasks that I had deployed running on ECS and with Fargate, and I was able to shift traffic over from one to another to some percentage that I wanted. And I was able to then verify inside my console that things look good. I was able to run some tests. I ran some tests from the command line that just basically continue to ping it, but tests can be as sophisticated as you need them to be. Your metrics and whatever else you're looking for in your logs that tell you that everything's running okay. You can imagine a scenario where all of this is automated. So after a 5% deployment for your Canary, you might bump that up to 30 or 40 or 50%, and then bump it up again, finally to 100%. So thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.